Welcome to the Stories with Traction podcast. I'm your host, Matt Zaun. Thank you for joining us as we uncover how stories are one of the most important aspects of your business. We'll talk about struggles, victories, and how you can utilize strategic storytelling to inspire those around you to action. Enjoy this episode. Since things have opened up in the world, I've been traveling all over the country. And the number one thing that I hear as a challenge from business leaders is winning the talent war. How do they win the talent war? How do they retain top talent? And what's interesting is that for many, many years, a lot of the same business leaders who were starting to get active regarding corporate social responsibility, unfortunately pushed that to the back burner because of the COVID pandemic. And it has been very, very difficult now to continue to retain that top talent. Because at the height of all the different surveys coming out, people are saying they want to be fulfilled, they want to have an impact, they want to really connect their passions with the employers that they're working with. So I'm very, very excited for today's conversation because we're going to be talking about business and nonprofits and corporate social responsibility and how organizations can utilize these stories to really propel their mission. Today, I'm joined with KATHERINE O'DONNELL, who's the co-founder of OP Creative Communications, which focuses on business and nonprofits, messaging, media relations, and marketing needs. Thank you so much for joining us, KATHERINE.
Thank you so much for having me, Matt.
Absolutely. How are you doing? What's going on in your world?
I'm doing well. I'm plugging along just like everybody else in 2022. It's going well. It's just a challenge, just like everybody else out there.
Sure. Yeah, and it's everyone else. There are so many changes, so much shifting. Right before we hopped on, I was going back and forth with this one message with this lady who I've had to reschedule on her. She's had to reschedule on me because so much is going on with our world, with school cancellations and daycares being closed. So if there's anything we've learned, it's constant change. It's learning how to adapt. And that's why I wanted to bring you on. I wanted to talk about adapting and change. Now, not from a buzzword pivot perspective. I think that word was radically overused in 2020 and 2021, but from a real, like a deeper level, from a purpose perspective. So not pivot, but actually tying into one's purpose. And here's what I mean by that. As I had mentioned, there's so many people right now focused on winning the talent war. And there's so many people right now not really truly leaning into their mission. I recently was talking to a gentleman a couple weeks back, and this individual had this mission and heart for something going on in the community. So he was pouring resources, his funding, his timing into different nonprofits, but he wasn't telling his people about it. He wasn't telling his team members. He wasn't telling the community. So everything that you do regarding messaging and marketing and media relations, you would probably tell this person that is an egregious mistake to hide this. So I want to dive into that. I want to kind of unpack some of these elements about corporate social responsibility and what businesses are doing to actually focus on this change. So for anyone listening, they may have heard of corporate social responsibility, CSR, in the past. Their picture might not be lining up with what your picture is. So can you talk a little bit about when someone says that, what does that mean to you?
I think corporate social responsibility means that they are taking on this want and this need to be able to help others. And I think that when you were talking about this, Matt, that there's a lot of corporations who want to do good and they are doing good, but like you said, they're not getting the word out and they're not being visible with it. So a lot of people are wanting to do good now. It's just, how do they get the word out? How do they tell their story, which is a key component, because a lot of people now really want to be able to help the environment, for instance. And if there is a business that is doing something to help the environment, those people are more willing to give their business to that corporation if they know that they're doing something good.
Absolutely. All right. So that's a really good point. So there's a few things I want to unpack with what you said. So to take a step back, I've worked with many business leaders in the past that while they were in the startup stage, they utilize resources in the community from nonprofits. So maybe they're getting started, they haven't gotten any funding at all, but they have an idea. They're gutting it out. They're utilizing every ounce of grit that they have. And these men and women have utilized resources in the community. They've made it, and now they want to give back. So they start pouring into X, Y, and Z organization. So now they're giving their time, their money, their talent, so to speak, through their team members, through paid time off. They're giving that to these organizations in the form of the CSR that we're talking about. How can they line that up with their core mission? You had mentioned environmental initiatives. So let's say, I'm throwing out a random example, but let's say that there is a manufacturer of a very interesting idea regarding straws, and they want to limit the amount of plastic. Okay, so they have a very interesting idea that it's a straw that's biodegradable, but it's much better than what we have on the market, and they want to really tie into different environmental organizations. Should they utilize that as a thread within their hiring, what they do as an organization? If they're supporting these environmental organizations, how would they work it out as the overall picture from a messaging perspective?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I would say that the corporation really has to live by its values. So if they truly believe in wanting to help the environment, they're not going to just do something to support, the massive amounts of straws in the environment. They're going to do anything and everything that they possibly can to help with climate change, or they're going to do, they're going to cut down on emissions, and they're going to cut down on, their carbon footprint. That's their value. And so that's their overarching value. It's not just about one specific thing like straws. So that's one thing that I just wanted to pull out of that, because I think that corporations, they can say, hey, we want to look good to everybody. But if you don't walk the walk or talk the talk, it's going to be kind of a mute situation. So you really have to figure out as a corporation what your value is and what you want to do to help. And that could be the environment, that could be animal welfare, it could be so many different types of platforms. And then I think it's once you build that value, you really start getting your employees to be involved in that value. Then you're saying, hey, you know what, we really want to have volunteer days, for instance. So we're going to help a nonprofit animal welfare organization in your city, and you can choose whatever that might be. And so you are really getting it out there that you are a corporation that people want to support, but you truly mean what you do.
Yeah, I really appreciate what you said about really meaning what you do. One of the things that I talk about quite frequently in my workshops is don't focus on the word of your company core values, focus on the stories that exemplify those core values, which is exactly what you're saying. So if company says, we believe in X, Y, and Z, prove it to me. Show me that you actually believe in X, Y, and Z. And a lot of that can be done with what they're doing in the community. So, with the example of the straw manufacturer, there's a lot of companies out there that they might be doing they might be making widgets, or they might be having whatever service, but their heart and their passion is with helping animals at an animal shelter. It might be so. If their mission is not even close to what their business is, what would you recommend they do? Because I see that a lot, where it might be a service provider. They might be providing SEO service for companies, but yet their heart is they really want to help individuals that are facing domestic violence. So those two things, they're in completely different categories. How would they how would they tie those together and share that message with their team and community if they're completely different things?
Well, there's a couple of points. So I would say if you were a CEO of a company and you truly believe in domestic violence, I think that's something that either you support as an individual or you get everybody on board with your company feeling that they want to support the same cause. If they don't believe in the same cause as you can still do whatever you're going to do to support domestic violence or whatever the case might be, all really good causes, but you really need to have your company be on board with what you're going to support. So I just wanted to highlight that. I think that a lot of times corporations, like if they're going to make that their value of they're going to support whatever the organization is or the cause is, then they say that from the get-go. They say when they're bringing on somebody and they're hiring them, they're saying, hey, these are our values. We want to make sure that you are a part of our value. And so that's their way of getting people involved. So I think that the biggest kind of takeaway from that is that corporations really need to be on the same page with whatever they want to support. And that's how their messaging is going to be. It's going to be about, hey, our value is that we support X, Y, and Z. This is our mission. We integrate it in everyday business that we do.
Do you recommend they do this by conducting employee surveys? How would you recommend, so let's say you had mentioned about a CEO. So let's say there's a CEO of an organization and she runs a medium-sized company of 500 people. And she's really passionate about A, B, and C. Would she send out a corporate email saying, hey, these are the initiatives I'm really passionate about. Why don't you pick if it aligns with what you're passionate about and kind of take it in from the team members? Because isn't she going to want buy-in from her organization before she just picks something? Would you recommend something like that? Or what are some other ways that a top leader can engage staff in order to make sure that they're all going into this, that they're motivated to all do this as an organization?
I think it's really important for a corporation to really find the values and try and make sure that they align with the corporation. So like you said before about, domestic violence and SEO, they don't quite go together. But, say some corporations, for instance, could do in-kind services to nonprofit organizations where they provide free SEO services and it allows an organization to really be able to thrive because a corporation has stepped in and provided their services and their knowledge. Now,
all right, so I just want to pause for a moment because I think what you just said is absolute gold. And I think so many organizations are not taking advantage of that. So what you just said about empowering team members, empowering their employees, that maybe, back to your point, and that was an awesome example that you just pulled out regarding the SEO. Maybe what they do is they're setting aside 4 hours a month or a day a month where they have a certain organization and they're actually helping them with their SEO. They're helping them with their marketing.
Right.
So instead of just pouring whatever amount of funding into it, they're actually giving them a practical, realistic, value add, and it ties into what they're doing. They're talking about SEO. Oh my goodness, if they truly believe that their service is helping the world, what better way to do that than actually uplift an organization that they all are passionate about? So I really appreciate you mentioning that.
One thing I do want to mention, coming from the nonprofit side for almost 20 years, is that they're always short-staffed. They always have so much to do. So as a corporation, if you are starting to target nonprofits that you want to partner with, make sure that you can do a lot of the heavy lifting for the nonprofit, because otherwise it's not going to work.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And let's talk about it from the angle of the nonprofit as well. So you had mentioned short-staffed. Obviously, nonprofits aren't turning away funding. They want as much fundraising as they possibly can have. what are some things that they can be mindful of connecting with business leaders in the community? Because often I feel like a lot of stuff gets lost in the noise. There's so many amazing organizations out there doing incredible work, helping their communities, but yet a lot of these business leaders are top targets as far as email and as far as even social media messaging, and they're constantly getting bombarded with messages from different nonprofits. What's a strategic way that let's say a director of a nonprofit can go about actually making these sound business relationships in the community?
I would say that it really is about the partnership, and it is a strategic type of partnership. So if, say, there is a company who believes in selling fur, and and the nonprofit, they want to work with a nonprofit that's animal welfare. Well, that's kind of a conflict of interest, right? So when you're thinking of that partnership, you really have to be strategic. Like, how can the corporation take the nonprofit to the next level? How can they elevate their visibility? How can they elevate their fundraising efforts? So establishing these types of partnerships is not just about, hey, we've got a little bit of work here, we can help you with it. It's kind of a long-term commitment, and it's one where you're supportive of each other. And it's not just, say, let's use the SEO as an example. It's not just about the SEO. You're educating the nonprofit staff about how to do the SEO. So say you're helping them in the beginning, you're doing a lot of the heavy lifting, but then you are educating the staff to be able to do it on their own as they move forward. But then you can go on to helping with other things within that nonprofit, whether that is helping to put the message out there to your 250,000 customer base that, hey, you're supportive of this organization, and then make sure that you have stats that explain what you've done to help that organization. So if you've started out with saying, when we first started in 2019, we helped that organization raise X number of dollars. And by 2021, same time period, we have now helped them quadruple their fundraising efforts. And they're now able to do X, Y, and Z with it. So it really validates the work that the corporation is doing with the nonprofit. It makes the partnership look really good on both ends. And it supports everybody in between.
So I want to ask a quality versus quantity question. I've seen it both ways, where I've seen companies get hyper focused on a specific nonprofit, and the business leaders end up becoming board members on the nonprofit. They end up heavily investing. They end up actually sharing numerous resources. They end up even like passing on staff from the business to the nonprofit. The mission is radically expanded. I've seen that approach. And then I've also seen the approach where businesses are giving a lot of money to numerous amounts of organizations, where basically what they're doing is, if an employee wants to give to a certain organization, the company's giving, like they're doing a match for them. So now you're talking, potentially hundreds of different nonprofits that are being invested in. Is there a balance? Is there a happy medium? What works the best when we're talking medium-sized companies? What works the best? Is it hyper focused, or is it throw a large net and help as many nonprofits as possible? What have you seen to be the most successful?
I would say, from the monetary perspective, giving money to organizations, it's passive income, right? So employee giving programs, they make a big difference to people in nonprofit because that's what they consider to be passive income. And so that really helps the nonprofits to reach their goals. I would say, from a visibility standpoint, having organizations support by offering lots of different types of services, that is very impactful. And then I would say also, just having employees know that a corporation is doing good for their community, that's a good way to bring on a new employee. So when we're talking about all the different areas, there's not one that's better than the other. They're just all impactful.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I mean, it's just like in business, right? There's numerous different businesses from a product and service perspective. The sky's the limit. I guess the different relationships that a business can have with a nonprofit, the sky's the limit as well. It's interesting to see companies do this very well and then also do it very poorly. And I want to talk about doing it very well. And I was working with a gentleman a little while back, and I was actually flabbergasted by this situation. So this was an extremely wealthy business leader in the community, and I was coaching him on storytelling. We were going through, how he can make his presentations better, and to try to figure out his story and his background. When I was going into the meeting, I had assumed that he was born into wealth, so to speak. I'm sorry, I take that back. I assumed that he had a struggle victory story. That was my assumption because of the amount of nonprofits that he gave to, his time, his attention, his resources. And this individual that I'm thinking of started numerous nonprofits himself. Okay. So I was going in with the assumption of a rags to riches story. He really needed to grind it out. And now he reached this level of success. Now he wants to give back. That was not his story. He was born into wealth. Okay. So he was born into an extremely wealthy family. And I had asked him, I said, why are you so passionate about this? How is this part of your DNA now, working with individuals that are extremely low income? How did that come about? And his response actually, it stunned me. He had said every single weekend, Saturday and Sunday, this very successful businessman who is going 1,000 miles a minute, who is working very hard Monday through Friday, sets aside Saturday and Sunday to work with nonprofits, because he said his entire perspective changed. Because when he's working with individuals that need to decide whether they're going to spend money to feed themselves or spend money to buy medicine to stay alive, he said his challenges pale in comparison. And he goes in every Monday morning and they have staff meetings. And part of the staff meetings, he'll share stories from the individuals that he worked with, look at all his leaders, and he'll say, the challenges we have in business, they're not really challenges. They're little speed bumps compared to what I witnessed this weekend. And he said the entire company culture has changed to, they're hyper achieving individuals because of their work with these different nonprofits. And I was fascinated by that mindset. So it's amazing how that can completely turn a company culture for a positive, like a motivational perspective. And now a lot of people on his team are getting involved in these nonprofits. A lot of people on his team are understanding that. And he's done a masterful job of sharing those stories back to his team members. And I want to talk about the storytelling piece for a moment. I feel like it's being missed a lot in the business world. I still feel like a lot of businesses still view CSR like a checkbox. They're just checking it off the list, and it's a huge missed opportunity. So once they've done everything that you are talking about, focusing in, helping with different resources, they're monetarily giving, but they're giving, PTO time for their staff to engage. Let's say they're doing everything you're saying. What should they be focused on regarding the storytelling aspect of that? Should they be focused on the storytelling aspect to the community? If so, what are some ways that they could do that? And should they be focused on the storytelling piece internally from a team member perspective? How would you handle the storytelling piece?
Both. It's very much about internal and external communications. So if you are selling it to the world, but you're not selling it internally, then nobody's on the same page. So internally, you have to really make sure that all of the staff know your employees are mission driven, and this is what they're going to do to help make the world better, or help make people or animals, or something that is, they're going to make it a lot easier for people to thrive, right? That's their internal messaging. Their external messaging is really about, we're doing this to support everybody on our staff knows that we are supporting it. We're all behind it. We all strive to see that our work is making a difference. And we continually help support nonprofits in our communities or around the world that align with our mission and our values. Now, that's kind of the external messaging. So if you don't have one or the other, you won't be successful. You really need to make sure that you are on the same page internally and externally with your messaging. I would say that, also when you are putting it out there, that you are very strategic in your words. Words matter. And I've said this before on LinkedIn, words make such a difference. So you can't just haphazardly throw words out there like, we're doing this, we're doing that. You have to be very strategic in how you're putting your words out there. And that is ultimately what's going to help tell your story and have people want to be able to support you because they know you're the real thing.
It's a great point. And I've seen a lot of the work that you do, and you're fantastic at what you do. So with people listening to this thing, how do I do this? What's the best way that they can connect with you, Katherine? Is there a certain email they should go to, website? What's the best way that they can connect with you?
They can connect with me on my website, which is OP Creative Communications, and that's O Peter as in P as in Peter, creativecommunications.com. They can also send me messages through LinkedIn. I would say that platform is something that I'm on the most because it allows me to be able to connect with both businesses and nonprofits. So I'm definitely very active on LinkedIn. I post very often, both, about how to deal with branding, messaging, public relations, marketing, communications, internal, external, just like what I've talked about on this podcast today. And then also about fundraising, because a lot of my background is on fundraising. And one thing that I do want to mention, Matt, is that, when we're talking about storytelling, what's so important for both corporations and nonprofits is to really focus on your why, your who, what, where, when, and why you're doing what you're doing, and then how you're doing it, because that is something that is incredibly important. If you don't have any of those aspects nailed down, no one is going to know what you do, and they're not going to want to support you.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So to backtrack, I will include what you just said in the show notes. So
Great.
People can just click, they can connect with you and make it very, very convenient for listeners. And then also, I just want to thank you. And I want to do a brief recap. I think there's a lot of value pieces from our conversation today. I learned a lot. I know a lot of people will get a lot out of this. So here's what I took away. Instead of companies just focusing on the words of the core values, they should really focus on the why that you mentioned. What are the different initiatives that exemplify those core values? They need to have a strategy in place. You talked about strategy. That's the how, right? How are they going to take their why, their mission, and connect it in the community with these different nonprofits? Then you had talked about the resources relationship piece. Then a relationship is built, right? How can they actually build these sound business relationships with business and nonprofit leaders? And then resource exchange, right? We had talked about the example of the SEO company. It's not just giving money. They might actually be giving their talent as well to help. I thought that was an incredible piece. You had talked about messaging. So this goes back into the storytelling. Once you have those relationships, what stories can you be sharing internally and externally to share with the world? This is what you're doing. This ultimately leads full circle how I started in the beginning on this is a way that this is a way companies can be winning the talent war, is because now individuals that are part of the organization, they are so tied into their why, their mission, that it's not just rolling out of bed in the morning to make widgets. They have purpose, they have fulfillment, they have an impact, and they're excited to engage. So thank you so much for your time, Katherine. I very much appreciate it. I thought that this was a fantastic conversation.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it myself too, Matt. We'll have to do it again.
For sure. Thank you for listening to the Stories with Traction podcast. If you have a story that you would like to share, feel free to drop an email to matt@mattzaun.com with the subject line Stories with Traction. Also, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, where I share tons of resources on how you can be a better storyteller. Remember, if you want to persuade with power and inspire those around you to action, you must share more stories.